So, Steven Crowder, 5 days ago, went back on Piers Morgan. This time, Piers Morgan is really calling him out for being a hypocrite, for being very, very anti-censorship, but then also, apparently, Crowder is in favor of banning TikTok, or, I'm sorry, forcing TikTok to sell to an American company. I'm not really going to take much of a stand yet. I'd rather just watch and kind of see what's going to happen because I don't really have a strong stance on this whole TikTok thing. However, I did look through a bit of an article here that we'll go over in a little bit, and it talks about some of the data TikTok collects. And to be honest, it's not really much different than any other social media app. Maybe there's an issue with how all of these apps collect our data, fine, but there's not really much that's unique to TikTok with it data mining or something like this. Even more so, they claim that the data is not kept in China. So there's no way that like China would be able to get our data that way. Even more so, the Chinese government wouldn't really need to rely on TikTok to even get access to Americans' personal info because there's already a bunch of shadowy, unregulated companies that specialize in buying and selling consumers' personal data. So the whole like thing with like TikTok being uniquely bad, it's kind of a farce. But anyway, let's go ahead and see what he has to say.
I'm a little nervous because we had such a good interaction our first go around. Sometimes I feel like the second one you want spicier. So
no, not at all. I enjoyed the last encounter. I want real is what I want. Let me start. Last time, pretty much your position with me about Alex Jones was don't be a free speech hypocrite, Piers. This time, I'm going to start by throwing that allegation back at you and say, how can the king of free speech be wanting to censor Americans from an entire platform that they absolutely love?
Well, first off, let's not go straight to king. I know that you're using your vernacular. We get CEO, president, I'll accept. I don't really see how it would be hypocritical. My issue is
totally a failed attempt at a joke there. Wow.
We've talked about Section 230, right? And this is where companies need to either be viewed as platforms, right? Be viewed as public utilities. They're fit from that. They don't have the same legal liability that publishers like the New York Times or Sun News or CNN, Fox News, whoever they are. But then they have the ability to censor people based on viewpoint. So that's my issue as it relates to big tech. As it relates to TikTok, you're talking about a foreign government, right? The communist Chinese government, who clearly do not have the best interests of Americans at heart. And we know that they're selling information. Well, selling, they don't really sell it to themselves. We know that they're spying on American citizens. We know that they have their hands on the scales of democracy here in the United States. That's a separate issue, right? We're not really talking about.
So again, even if what Crowder is saying is true, then that's concerning. There's obviously something that there's a conversation that we should have about that. But they're not doing this through TikTok. There are other ways that the Chinese government could collect data on American citizens. There are plenty of other ways. Even more so, as far as TikTok goes, I mentioned this article a second ago, but it says TikTok and other social media companies ultimately collect data to refine our feeds. TikTok tracks which videos users engage with and how long they do so. The privacy policy also enables the app to track the contents of direct messages, as well as your country, location, internet address, and device type. When individuals consent, the platform can also collect users' exact location, contacts, age, and phone number. It also seems to estimate your household income and knows how expensive the smartphone or laptop you're scrolling on is. So again, maybe that sounds a little spooky. That's a lot of data. But it's worth noting that TikTok does not collect any more data than other social media companies. A privacy researcher working with the Washington Post found that TikTok gathers less data than Facebook in some cases. So again, this goes into how this might very well be absurd and concerning, and maybe there's a conversation to have about that, but there's nothing uniquely sinister about TikTok. TikTok is owned by Chinese artificial intelligence company ByteDance. While the TikTok CEO has assured lawmakers that users' data is protected and not stored in China, concerned policymakers and citizens alike are suspicious of what might be happening behind closed doors. Lawmakers have pointed to Chinese laws that allow the government to demand consumer data from companies for intelligence purposes. So if what the TikTok CEO is saying is true, that the user's data is protected and not stored in China, how would this Chinese law even be relevant? And then the same kind of thing, again, that we already talked about. China just simply would not need to rely on TikTok if they were interested in data mining American citizens.
We're talking about an antagonistic government with TikTok.
Well, to a point, Lord Copper, there's no actual evidence as things stand that Chinese authorities are collecting or sharing any data from Americans on TikTok, unless you've established any.
Sure, there's plenty. I mean, there's plenty that have also been admitted when we were talking about these hearings, but I've experienced it personally as well. I mean, I've been banned from TikTok for saying that I don't know what we're allowed to say on your program.
You are, yeah. We're uncensored.
All right, that Xi Jinping has a small penis. We did a segment called Trash TikTok where we weren't talking about LGBTQ
Wait,
issues.
you getting banned from TikTok because you made fun of a Chinese leader means that they are owned by... Wait. We already know they're owned by China, but it means that they're like controlled by China? It means that they're taking our data? So this TikTok site is literally saying it's not even Chinese owned? I'm confused now. Myth. TikTok's parent company ByteDance is Chinese owned. TikTok's parent company ByteDance was founded by Chinese entrepreneurs, but today roughly 60% of the company is beneficially owned by global institutional investors. An additional 20% of the company is owned by ByteDance employees around the world, including Australians. The remaining 20% is owned by the company's founder, who's a private individual and is not part of any state or government entity. TikTok and ByteDance are headquartered in China. They're saying that's a myth. TikTok, which is not available in mainland China, has established Los Angeles and Singapore as headquarters locations to meet its business needs. Myth. ByteDance censors TikTok content on behalf of the CCP or Chinese government. Fact. There are no TikTok content moderators in China. Content moderation on TikTok is overseen by our Singapore, US, and Ireland-led trust and safety teams. All content is moderated based only on our publicly available community guidelines, which are also developed by our trust and safety team. Regardless of how content is flagged to TikTok, via formal or informal government request, by our automated systems at time of upload, or from community reports, no content is removed without going through our established moderation process. TikTok does not remove content on behalf of any government, except in compliance with legal process for content that violates local law. TikTok does not operate in mainland China. So they're saying if it's not locally established there, then they can't violate local law. Oh, look, they're saying this is a myth also. Under its 2017 national intelligence law, the Chinese government can compel ByteDance to share Australian TikTok user data. They're saying this is a myth. Australian TikTok user data is stored in Singapore, Malaysia, and the US, and subject to local laws. TikTok does not store user data in China, has not shared Australian user data with the Chinese government, and would not even if asked. Interesting. Again, Crowder's example just does not prove shit. My guess is you would be removed if you said anybody had a small penis. TikTok is notorious for being way too sensitive. That's under body shaming and stuff like that. And TikTok is all about making like this really positive community. I'm not saying that that is fact. I'm saying they are disputing it.
But if you also look at the regulations, what people are talking about in place here is protecting American citizens. Do I think that the American government's biased on its citizens? Sure, absolutely. That doesn't change the fact that a foreign government, especially when we went through, gosh, how many years of the Russia collusion hoax, it's happening right in front of your eyes. That's my issue with TikTok. It's quite a bit different from, and by the way, I don't think that it goes far enough as far as demanding transparency. I've understood the critics to say that, well, this is obviously something that would favor Facebook. And I do think in practice, it could. And I do think that Facebook obviously disproportionately censors conservative voices, but that doesn't mean that we should do nothing going into an election. I mean,
this isn't even true. The last available data strongly suggested that Facebook actually amplified conservative voices.
And that one story of the Hunter Biden laptop, that one story changes the election according to the voters themselves who voted for Biden. That one story that was not permitted anywhere.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good point, chat. Thank you. Yeah, the fact that Crowder would bring up the penis thing in lieu of the allegations going around right now about him whipping his dick out to all of his employees. Crowder, man, he has always got penises on the brain.
Facebook, not on Twitter. Right afterwards, I said, okay, New York Post, you can get that story out there, but you have to remove your original post and upload a new one. And you know, as people who swim in this space, you know exactly what that does. You lose the interactions, you don't have the same amount of momentum, and that story might as well not exist. That one story changes the face.
I would need to look into this again because there's two things here. One, I've heard and I thought that the Hunter Biden laptop story contained like sensitive information, doxing information, maybe. I think that might be a fair enough reason for them to stop that story for a minute from being just shared on their platform. If not, however, it could have been an overstep. So I don't know. It's just something to keep on to kind of think about. It was revenge porn. Oh yeah, that's right. Wasn't it about? Yeah, didn't it contain revenge porn? I don't know. I think that it made sense for them not to let the story go around on the site.
The United States election, disregarding everything else, like the unconstitutionality of the mail-in voting and what they did in Pennsylvania, disregarding all of that one story, let alone an even playing field for different points of view. That's the issue that we see with big tech in general.
Yeah, but here's the thing, you see, on that, I completely agree with you. In fact, I've not only written multiple columns saying exactly that because it was the New York Post, who I write columns for, who got so crudely censored. They were kicked off social media for a couple of weeks at the crucial time of that election, literally in the last few weeks of the campaign. And they reckon there could have been a swing of 10% at least, which would have been enough. I've said to Donald Trump, if you stop banging on about the stolen election without producing the hard evidence required to convince people and focused exclusively on what happened with that New York Post expose of Hunter Biden's laptop, I think you would have a lot more general support from the American people about that election being taken from you, because there's no doubt to me it did have a genuinely material impact, and it was down to big tech censorship. But that's where, again, I put it to you that there's a slight double standard from you, Mr. Crowder, and I say that with great respect, that the double standard is, here you are, you're actually currently taking the government and big tech to court over their shadow banning of social media. I've experienced that myself. In fact, once Elon Musk bought Twitter, in the following few months, I gained, or probably regained, over 500,000 followers, whereas in the year before that, I'd basically batted a draw. Right? That's not a coincidence. That is Elon Musk brilliantly getting under the bonnet of what was going on and realizing that people with any kind of contentious views, particularly if they were anti-woke, as I was being pretty...
Dude, Piers Morgan is just, he's sounding so loony right now. There is no evidence that conservatives were shadow banned. All the evidence shows that conservative voices, conservative posts, tend to do better. They tend to outperform liberal posts. Consistently. This is just becoming a cringy circle jerk. Crowder's mentioned penises and Hunter Biden's laptop, which had pictures of Hunter Biden's penis on it. 2020. Despite cries of censorship, conservatives dominate social media. Republicans have turned alleged liberal bias in Silicon Valley into a major closing theme for the election cycle, blah, blah, blah. The findings demonstrate how a small number of conservative users routinely outpace their liberal rivals and traditional news outlets in driving the online conversation, amplifying their impact a little more than a week before Election Day. They contradict the prevailing political rhetoric from some Republican lawmakers that conservative voices are censored online.
And I think we broadly agree about things like the censorship of the New York Post and that election campaign. I just find that inconsistent with you wanting to ban an entire social media platform that is American run. It's American run in America, and which I think anyway, even if you manage to do it and win this battle, I think the Chinese would very, very quickly get all that data anyway another way.
Well, that may be so, but to be clear, I don't want to ban TikTok. That's not my position.
What do you want to do?
That's never been my position. No, and I certainly don't want a content ban. What we're talking about is a ban on ownership of foreign influence, right?
That's what effectively
banning. There should be no banning of TikTok.
Right, but that's banning it from America, isn't it?
No, it's not banning it from America. It's putting it in the hands of American interests. Look, I think there's a big difference between let's say, a Canadian company, although that remains to be seen now with Trudeau. He's as bad as it possibly gets. This guy didn't do blackface. This guy did black arms and shins, and he did it like 19 times. You know this, right? He did it like 20 times.
I think Trudeau, listen, again...
Crowder, this isn't one of your bits, dude. You're not on your show, okay? Why are you rambling all of a sudden about fucking Trudeau? What? Get back to the topic.
Yes, I agree. It's just I just find it funny. That
but let me pin you down then. What is your exact position about TikTok in America?
It's communist Chinese ownership or influence. So, for example, you asked for evidence. I believe it was in 2020, 2021. You guys can look this up. Don't quote me on the year. It's one of those 2 years. There was leaked audio from more than, I think it was 70, 80 internal TikTok meetings, right? And it showed that the employees of ByteDance, they repeatedly were accessing non-public data from American TikTok users. They have actually said that everything is seen in China. This is not a content ban.
Yeah, let's look that up. Leaked audio from 80 internal TikTok meetings shows that U.S. user data has been repeatedly accessed from China. For years, TikTok has responded to data privacy concerns by promising that information gathered about users in the United States is stored in the United States rather than China. Okay, yeah, we just read that. But according to leaked audio from more than 80 internal TikTok meetings, China-based employees of ByteDance have repeatedly accessed non-public data about U.S. TikTok users. Despite a TikTok executives' sworn testimony in an October 2021 Senate hearing that a world-renowned US-based security team decides who gets access to this data. 9 statements by 8 different employees describe situations where US employees had to turn to their colleagues in China to determine how US user data was flowing. US staff did not have permission or knowledge of how to access the data on their own, according to the tapes. This definitely seems very yikesy. But again, like, China can just access data another way. I don't know if this is really enough to shut down the entire company or whatever. Props to Crowder for actually, like, bringing up something real.
That's the issue, is getting it into American ownership.
Right.
I do not think.
But if you
that is
say, but if you
inconsistent.
prohibit the Chinese from having ultimate ownership of TikTok, they'll simply remove it from the United States, as you know. So effectively, you are calling for a ban, because if you get the result that you want, the Chinese will pull the plug on TikTok in America. So that is a ban.
No, they won't. They won't. They have plenty of ways of still running in America and not having a golden share.
Well, they said they will.
I mean, I also don't think that, well, they can say whatever they want. If they want to do that, that's their choice. I also don't think that the communist Chinese government should be buying American farmland at all. I don't think it should be able to buy land near our ports. This is not an issue of freedom of speech. This isn't about property rights. This is one of the few legitimate purviews. And I know I'm very conservative. I'm very laissez-faire government. I'm a federalist, but I'm not a libertarian in the sense that I don't believe the federal government has a legitimate purview. One of those few legitimate roles is to protect Americans from legitimate external and internal threats. That's why we have child pornography laws, which we discussed in the show today and did a hidden camera investigation. With
Does it not make you pause for thought, though, Stephen, that people like Vivek Ramaswamy, who I know you really like, Donald Trump, and others on the conservative right are vehemently in disagreement with you about this?
They are now.
And Biden says he'll sign it. I mean, that's got to give you pause for thought, isn't it?
It absolutely does give me pause for thought. You're right. You would like to think, hold on a second. You know, it's kind of like, I think, the old Alice Cooper quote when it was John Kerry versus George Bush. He said, if I wasn't a George Bush supporter, I would read the list of Kerry supporters and immediately switch, because that included Osama bin Laden at the point in time. However, I have to let logic prevail and say, hold on a second. Why was Vivek? Donald Trump had a almost identical law that he was about to put through. Why are they now against it? We can disagree on that. However, looking at the limited
Didn't Trump come out like all against TikTok, and then he had a meeting with a TikTok person and they gave him a giant donation, and then he literally just like changed tune? Yeah, right here. Ex-president's U-turn coincides with recent meeting held with billionaire Republican mega donor who is deeply invested in parent company ByteDance. Why is Donald Trump now defending TikTok in the U.S.?
Of this kind of a bill, I believe that certainly getting the Communist Chinese Party out of dealing with Americans' private data is important. Also, the fact that, look, they have tilted the scales. We've seen it with Facebook. We see it with Google, YouTube, and before Elon purchased, sorry, it always screws me up, X. Such a silly name. I want to say Twitter. I get it. It's X. You've been X. It sounds like a reality show. I think that's a legitimate role of the government. I don't think that the government should, for example, Jen Psaki calling for Spotify to ban Joe Rogan because he's critical of the mRNA injection.
Why did he just say Spotify?
That would be an illegitimate overreach of government. We know that they do that. We know that they've done that with COVID, Google, YouTube. So I'm not defending the American government as though they are inherently altruistic, but we certainly know that the communist Chinese government doesn't have our interests at heart. And that being said, I also understand 8D chess. Let China buy up land near our ports. And then if it does come down to some sort of global conflict, just say, yeah, we're taking it.
Well, it's actually, I mean, look, the question I would have for you, I said, look, you're concerned for China getting its fingerprints into American real estate or property or land or whatever is fine. What about the fact they own so much of American debt? I mean, if China wanted to turn the tap off tomorrow of America's economy, it actually could. I mean, that would concern me a lot more, frankly, than kids watching dancing videos on TikTok. I'm surprised that this is a hill. I'm surprised.
Yeah, see, that's kind of what I was getting at also. Like, there are other ways in which China is a danger to us, and it's not TikTok.
It's the hill you want to die on when it comes to Chinese interference in America. They own a lot of your ass, Mr. Crowder.
First off, I do not want to die on this hill. You said I want to die on this hill. Second, I agree with their tiny fingerprints all over our crap. I completely agree.
This British guy is spilling the tea.
And I also have a problem with the fact that we spend more on the interest on our debt than we do on the military. People do not realize that the spending is out of control. However, when it comes to setting a budget, all of a sudden we get a little bit murky on the rule book. So I've been remarkably consistent. Yep, we need to reduce our deficit. We need to do something about the debt. We also need to protect our elections from foreign interference. We need to protect our constitutional republic from bad actors. That would be pretty consistent across the board. It needs to be done in a way that is consistent with our First Amendment rights here in the United States. And obviously, the only thing consistent with big tech is that they've been remarkably inconsistent. They're not acting, actually. They're not following the laws. Let me give you an example here. Like, this is an issue that we run into. You're very familiar with this, having worked in journalism, single-party consent laws. This is how investigative journalism operates. Without this, there can be no Watergate, for example. This means that you can record a conversation if you are the only party who decides to record the conversation, as long as you are taking place in this conversation. Meaning it's you, someone else, you can record it. That's the law. I think there are 11 states that are dual-party consent. YouTube doesn't honor that law. In other words, if you record someone well within your legal bounds in a single-party consent state, YouTube has come to us, and they do it with investigative journalists. They say, hold on a second, the person who was being recorded didn't want to be recorded, so we're removing it. So how can investigative journalism exist at all? How can you at all speak truth to power? How can you catch those in power if they're corrupt, if you have big tech running interference for them? So I've been remarkably consistent in and if people disagree, that's fine. I don't want anyone banned, to be clear. And if they want to be private platforms, they want to be publishers, they can do that too. The only issue that I have is they need to decide, do they benefit from the protections of 230, where they are treated as utilities, meaning Verizon, or God forbid you're using Vonage for long distance calls like one of my grandparents. If they're using one of these services, even if they're openly talking about how they support Adolf Hitler, again, Hitler bad to anyone tuning in, you can't remove them from this telephone service because they're treated like utility. These luxuries, these protections from legal liabilities, these are afforded to big tech platforms, but they will remove people simply because
But they have a platform, and they also platform speech. So it is different. It's like a TV show being able to benefit from certain protections, but then also being able to decide what airs on the TV and what doesn't.
My point, and the only issue that I've been championing here is, if you want to be a private platform like the New York Times, like CNN, go ahead. If you want to be treated as a public platform, as a utility that Section 230 allows, then you can't censor based on political point of view, because that's when we end up with Hunter Biden laptop story. That's when we end up with the Ashley Biden diary.
Okay, but would you be comfortable? My final point.
No, that's where we have conservatives that are willing to share like people's dick pics if it means getting them like election points. If it was that you're not allowed to censor people on political opinions, fine. But that's just not happening. Conservatives just break the rules more often.
Would you be comfortable, you, Stephen Crowder, with all the reputation you've built up for certain points of view, would you be comfortable if ultimately the government, the United States government, takes action in the way that you would like it to, and as a consequence, China pulls a plug on TikTok, and tens, maybe hundreds of millions of Americans who thoroughly enjoy TikTok look at Stephen Crowder and go, wow, that guy called for more big government laws to censor my free speech right to enjoy TikTok, which is run in America by an American company, separate from the parent company in China. Would you be comfortable with that scenario playing out?
Well, first off, that is such a loaded scenario that it would be tough to say which part with which I agree.
It's the inevitable consequence of what you're planning.
The Communist Chinese Party cannot have a golden share interest in TikTok because you have misused it. We already know you've misused it, so you've got to start playing by the rules. And they say that we're—
Do we know that they misused it? Like, just them accessing the data even? Like, how did they misuse that?
We're going to take our tiny little ball back to our house and go home. Yeah, I would be fine with that.
What?
I just think
Now, bringing up penises, now you're talking about tiny balls. Dude, what is up with this man?
play by the rules.
Stephen Crowder, I want more big government laws. I want more censorship.
I thought you were past this. Aren't you starting your own platform? Come on. Don't
are you not uneasy about the way this is going?
What was that?
You're not uneasy about this potential headline?
I'm not. I stand by completely, but that's not what I said.
From the king of
yeah, you're right. He couldn't even answer a hypothetical question either. Like, Piers laid this out. Like, would you be comfortable with that scenario? Listen, in that case, just bite the fucking bullet. Yeah, I'd be okay with some people being mad at me or thinking that it's hypocritical, but I also think that if they really heard my approach, if they really heard my perspective, that they might be more likely to support my perspective.
Speech, or whatever you want to call yourself, the CEO of free speech to the CEO of censorship.
You are into the royalty, aren't you? Get over it.
I think you'd make a good prince, actually. You would make a good king. Kings are reserved for people like me.
Sleep with my relative?
No, it's actually your name. It's not very kingly. It'd have to be someone like Piers. Piers is old English.
It's not very kingly, and my blood is still red. I don't have the blue. I don't think I do.
There's a reason we've never had a King Steve. It's just not. It's not going to happen.
That's fair. We could agree on that.
Can we agree about this? We talked about Alex Jones last time. In the last few weeks alone, since he was restored to X, and my criticism of Elon Musk led to him cancelling an interview with me before it even happened, because he objected to mild criticism of him doing a U-turn on that decision to bring back Alex Jones. But I think I've been vindicated by some of the insanity that Jones has been posting on X in the last few weeks. He posted a video of the terror.
Elon Musk is such a fucking baby. He is such a spineless little coward. Mild criticism from Piers Morgan, and you're like, I'm canceling the interview.
He posted a video of the terror attack in Moscow with the words NATO strikes. Another headline based on one of his posts. Globalist Macron plans Ukrainian false flag to launch World War III. Another video entitled World Population...
What? Holy shit. Oh my god, those are some mad conspiracies. This guy's like mad-libbing with conspiracy theories, no joke.
Declines for the first time in centuries as globalist culling operation continues to accelerate. I mean, all of this, as you know, and as I know, and as Alex Jones knows, and this is the pertinent point, is complete and utter invented baloney and not based on anything even close to resembling fact. Is it right? I mean, you want to protect American interests. Is it right that you have somebody like Jones with the massive platform that he has, which you know he abused so badly with Sandy Hook families, he was ordered to pay $1 billion? Right?
I don't know that.
What, that he abused Sandy Hook families?
I will go with you on everything, except I don't know that Alex Jones knows, and I don't know that he horrendously abused his platform. I just want to make sure that I'm clear as to...
If you've lost in court multiple times for defamation, that is literally the fucking definition of abusing your platform. You have used your platform to cause emotional harm to another person by spreading provable lies.
By the way he went about targeting the families of the Sandy Hook victims, in my view, was one of the most despicable, deliberate defamations I've ever seen. Hence the $1 billion plus payout, which he so far failed to, I think, even pay $1. But the consequences of what he did there to generate vast personal wealth by pouring misery, fuel onto the misery of those families, I think was unconscionable and should have been why Elon Musk, when he originally was asked about it and said he wouldn't let people who stood on the graves of dead children be on the platform. I thought he was right the first time. Anyway, we won't get into that particular debate again, but...
Look at Crowder just like sipping his little mug and shrugging and all. Well, what can you do? I personally prefer to stand on the graves of dead children, but yeah, that's me.
Given the other,
did it. You just did for a minute.
I'm talking about why. I'm talking about why I had the falling out with Elon about it. But in terms of the recent headlines based on his posts, have you revised your opinion at all about whether it is right that people like Alex Jones are allowed to do this to big audiences on things like X, given they're spouting what I think
the caption said eggs instead of X. That's funny.
Is complete deliberate nonsense designed to make money.
See, there's the word right there. Deliberate. And you and I both know that you're familiar with defamation laws, libel, and slander, and someone can say whatever they want if they believe it to be true. Now, I don't know. That's the one thing that...
Well, you don't need to know. The court decided it, my friend.
And someone can say whatever they want if they believe it to be true. Now, I don't know.
He's weaseling, by the way. Crowder is such a weasel right here.
That's the one thing that I said. I don't know that Alex Jones would know this to be untrue. I disagree with what you've just... Of course, I can't see what it is that you brought up. I've never maintained a position that I agree with Alex Jones on everything. I don't. But here's the beauty. First off, deliberate is key. If he's deliberately lying, that's different. And there's a law against that, right? If he's deliberately defaming an individual.
You think
But
he
the-
genuinely...
Yeah, but wait. It's because of those laws that he now owes money to families for defamation.
He thinks that NATO launched that terror attack on Moscow.
I know Alex Jones, and I believe it's very likely.
Well, you think he
I believe
genuinely
he's sitting at
believes
his
it?
computer
Or...
saying, this is clearly has the marks from NATO all over. This is what's happening. And they're putting chemicals in the water. They're turning amphibians into asexual anamorphic beings. I've seen the papers. I believe that he probably believes it.
You know, Crowder gives me the vibe of like the guy in class or like in the friend group who's trying to be funny and instead just annoys everybody and everyone's like, ha 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 ha. Could you shut the fuck up now, please? That impression was spot on, not gonna lie. The impression may have even been good, but it was just so like, you're in the middle of a debate and you're on like a news show and suddenly you just start doing impressions. It just, I don't know, it just comes off cringe.
He probably believes it, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. I'm not in the business of
if
doing
he
that.
did,
But here's
if he
one thing
didn't
I am in
believe
the
it,
business of doing. Let me finish.
if he didn't believe it, what would you
It's
think?
very important that you and I are able to discuss it. What happened before is what I believe to be completely unacceptable. Where Alex Jones, because of 10 people on one conference call, said his point of view will not be permitted, and so we can misrepresent it for him. You disagree with what he said based on what you're telling me. I disagree with his position, but the fact that we are able to combat it with better ideas or better information is far better for society. And by the way, the alternative...
This is just bullshit. Like, this is the same exact recycled talking point that they've been saying forever. Well, if you let a bunch of people say bad things, then more good things will start being said to combat it. This isn't true. And even if it is true, it doesn't stop the harm being done from the bad things being said. This was proven with January 6th. Even with all the people that were combating the election fraud, misinformation, there were still enough people who fell for it. And there are now people in prison because of that. Because they were duped. Because they were stupid enough to fall for it.
is far more dangerous. We've seen it at work. If these people, and by these people I mean progressive left, would have their way, not only Alex Jones, yours truly, you eventually, Joe Rogan would be gone. When you have members of the administration deliberately calling for censorship of individual programs,
But what
not
about
even
this
platforms,
then? Okay.
that is far more terrifying than
What about
someone
this?
saying something.
The same
granted
Alex Jones in 2012 launched a petition on a White House petition website page to have me deported from the United States because I was criticizing the Second Amendment. Now, where do you sit with that, Mr. Crowder? Because it wasn't that an appalling attempt to censor my right to free speech, which, by the way, Barack Obama, who was president, eventually did announce, because he had to, because it reached a certain threshold on that website, on the White House website, that I was allowed to stay in the country because I was entitled to my First Amendment rights to comment, even adversely, on the Second Amendment. What did you think of Alex Jones's attempt to censor me by actually removing me from the United States?
I like how like he's being given so many examples of like, here's a contradiction. Here's where this seems like you're advocating for government censorship. Here's somebody that you support who advocated for censorship. You said you're the king or the CEO of anti-censorship. What do you have to say about this? And every time Crowder just has some weaselly little excuse to get his way out, to worm his way out.
I think it's funny. And I don't think it was meant to be taken very seriously.
Yes,
if they were
it was.
actually going to immigration and ICE and have you removed, then of course I would disagree with that. But I'm not going to lie. I think that is hilarious as all get out. You being deported for what you said.
I was saved by Obama. That's why I will always have a soft spot for Barack Obama, because he literally saved me for the American people. And my God, you've shown a lack of gratitude ever since.
Well, he's not.
Yeah, geez. Well, all kidding aside on their part, I mean, Crowder totally he's failing this on every single aspect. He could have even just phrased this better. Like, you could have literally been like, well, obviously I am a big believer in free speech, so I do think that you have freedom of speech to say whatever you want about the Second Amendment or anything else for that matter. I obviously disagree with the decision or with the call to have you deported. However, I personally feel like this is more likely to be a joke. And if it was a joke, I think it'd be pretty funny. If it was serious, obviously I would disagree with that. He literally could have phrased it like that, and it would have sounded so much better. Small correction. Okay, thank you, chat. Small correction then. Yes, Alex Jones was found civilly liable by default because his entire side failed to show up, most likely because they realized he was obviously in the wrong. Okay.
Acted on behalf of the American people when he was president or his post-presidency, so it wouldn't surprise me. But I don't think that you should be removed just because you're wrong about the Second Amendment, Piers. And I know that you've reviewed your points of view on that, and I think that you've clarified your positions.
Yeah.
They're far more reasonable these days, from what I understand. And I think that's the beauty of having a dialogue.
I agree.
I think that we are able to discuss these different ideas as a good. That is very, very different from a foreign actor, a communist government, who, by the way, it also wouldn't make sense at all if they didn't have any ownership, why it would be removed. Right? This is kind of one of those circular logic issues. Well, if China said they're going to remove it, if it can't be under the interest of ByteDance, right? If the Chinese Communist government can't have a golden share in it, then they'll remove it. Well, hold on a second. I thought they said that they were saying they have no ownership in it. There's a huge difference, by the way. There's a huge difference, for example, between American citizens having the right to own and bear arms and non-citizens. And that's something really, if I can just touch on this for a second, we do have a constitution here in the United States. And how it is fundamentally different is the First Amendment. You go through all of them, right? We don't believe that our government, certainly not the founding fathers, grant rights. They don't create rights. They simply recognize God-given inalienable rights, and they serve to protect them. Now, because other countries don't share that point of view, it is the duty of our government to recognize the God-given birthrights, fundamental human rights founded in natural rights to its citizens, because citizens of the world who are not citizens of the United States, they do not have the same skin in the game. They don't have a vested interest. They want the opposite of what the American view of foundational rights are.
This is contradictory, because if everybody has these fundamental God-given rights and the government simply recognizes it, then it literally doesn't follow that people in other countries would not then have those rights. Maybe they don't currently have access to those rights, but he would have to agree that to be logically consistent, everybody would have to be given or owed, I guess, God-given rights and freedoms.
There's a huge difference, and I have no problem delineating between American citizens benefiting from the constitutional protection endowed by our creator and members of a communist Chinese government. It's a conversation we can have, but that delineation is
so like the creator only gives rights to Americans? What? Clearly you receive these rights from the government. Clearly I don't like to think of the government being responsible for rights. I don't like that. However, the government does protect our rights in many ways.
I don't shy away from.
And Stephen Crowder, what I will tell you is I intend to go away from this interview and immediately post the highlights to TikTok, where we'll get millions of views. So thank you very much.
Stay Xi Jinping has a small penis. See how far you get.
Always good.
Crowder any chance he can to say the word penis. Man, oh man. If you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member today. Members get early access to videos, access to all the stream VODs, and exclusive access to emotes as well. So if you'd like to support the channel, become a member today.